My name is Querida, and at 29 years old, I discovered that the two people I trusted most in this world had been sleeping together in my bed for 6 months. My best friend since college and my husband, the woman who stood beside me at my wedding, became the woman who destroyed it. But here's the thing about betrayal and karma. 6 years later, when she walked into my wedding reception uninvited and saw who I'd married, her face went completely white. The man holding me close and calling me my love in front of everyone made her realize exactly what she'd lost and what I'd gained. Before I tell you how karma works in the most unexpected ways, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Smash that like button and subscribe, because when my ex-best friend saw who I married, her face was worth every tear I cried 6 years ago. I was 23 years old when I married Drew Castellano, and I thought I had my entire life figured out. We'd met at a summer barbecue thrown by mutual friends when I was 21, fresh out of Boston University with my teaching degree in hand. Drew was 25, working in corporate finance, charming and attentive in all the ways that made my heart race. He had this boyish smile that made you want to trust him immediately, and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. We dated for 2 years before he proposed on a beach in Cape Cod, getting down on one knee in the sand, while the sun set behind him like something out of a movie. I cried happy tears and said yes immediately, already picturing our future together. The wedding was everything I'd dreamed of. A small ceremony at a vineyard in September with 200 guests, mostly family and close friends, celebrating our commitment under strings of lights as leaves turned gold around us. I worked as an elementary school teacher in Boston, Massachusetts, teaching 2nd grade to kids with gap-toothed smiles and endless energy. Drew's job in corporate finance paid well enough that we could afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Cambridge, with plans to upgrade once we started having children. Our life together felt blessed. Sunday mornings meant trips to the farmer's market, loading up on fresh vegetables and artisan bread. We'd cook together in our tiny kitchen, dancing to old jazz records, while pasta boiled on the stove. The first 3 years of marriage were exactly what I'd hoped for. We upgraded to a small house in Somerville after saving for 2 years, a charming place with creaky floors and a backyard barely big enough for a grill. I loved my students, watching them learn to read and solve math problems, sending them home with gold stars on their papers. Drew got promoted, twice his salary, climbing steadily. We talked constantly about having babies, converting the spare bedroom into a nursery, choosing names we both loved. But there was another constant in our lives during those years, someone who felt less like a friend and more like family. Her name was Sienna Walsh, and she'd been my roommate freshman year at Boston University. We'd shared a cramped dorm room with cinder block walls and matching twin beds, staying up late, talking about our dreams and fears, building a friendship I thought would last forever. Sienna was everything I wasn't. Tall, standing 5 feet 9 inches, in her bare feet, with long auburn hair that caught the light like copper, and striking green eyes that seemed to see right through people. She'd majored in fashion merchandising and landed a job at a high-end department store in downtown Boston, managing their luxury retail section. She came from money, a wealthy Connecticut family with a summer house and a winter house, and the kind of casual privilege that felt foreign to someone like me whose parents had worked 2 jobs each to put me through college. Sienna was charismatic in a way that drew people to her like moths to flame. She was the life of every party, always knowing the right thing to say, always dressed impeccably, always turning heads when she walked into a room. She dated frequently, but nothing ever got serious. "I'm too independent," she'd tell me over coffee, laughing, as she described her latest failed relationship. "I don't want to be tied down like you are." She'd been my maid of honor at my wedding to Drew, standing beside me in a blush-colored dress, holding my bouquet while I exchanged vows. The 3 of us became a unit over those early years of marriage. Sienna joined us for dinner parties and game nights, sitting at our table eating the pasta I'd cooked, drinking the wine Drew had chosen, laughing at inside jokes we'd developed over years of friendship. Every Thursday night, Sienna came over for what we called our girls' night. We'd open a bottle of wine, watch reality television, and talk about everything from work drama to family issues to our hopes for the future. Drew would usually retreat to his office to work or watch sports, giving us space. Looking back now, I can see things I missed then. The way Sienna always asked detailed questions about our marriage. How's the intimacy? Does Drew still surprise you? What does he do that drives you crazy? At the time, I thought she was just curious, maybe learning what to look for in her own future relationship. I trusted them both completely, absolutely, without question or doubt. Sienna was my sister in every way that mattered, the person who knew all my secrets and fears. Drew was my husband, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me until death do us part. The idea that either of them would betray me was as foreign as the idea that the sun might not rise tomorrow. Around our 3rd anniversary, things started to shift in ways I couldn't quite name. Drew began working later hours, taking more business trips, coming home exhausted and distant. When I tried to talk to him about his day, his answers were vague and distracted. He started keeping his phone face down on tables, taking calls in other rooms, changing his passcode to something I didn't know. Our intimacy dwindled from a few times a week to maybe once every 2 weeks. And when I tried to initiate, he'd claim he was too tired or stressed from work. Sienna started cancelling our Thursday night plans more frequently. Sorry, work emergency. Sorry, not feeling well. Sorry, got called in for inventory. Her excuses always seemed legitimate, and I tried not to take it personally. We were all getting older, busier, more consumed by our careers. This was just what happened when you grew up, right? But there was this nagging feeling in my gut, a whisper I kept trying to silence. Something felt off, wrong, like a note played slightly out of tune in a familiar song. One of my colleagues at school mentioned that Drew had seemed distant when he'd attended a school fundraiser with me. Your husband barely spoke to you all night, she'd said, concern in her voice. Is everything okay? I'd laughed it off. He's just stressed with work. But alone in bed at night while Drew slept, turned away from me, I wondered if that was really all it was. Sienna started asking odd questions during our increasingly rare coffee dates. When will Drew be home tonight? Is he travelling this week? Does he usually work this late? At the time, I thought maybe she was trying to plan when to come over, coordinating schedules. Now I realise she was making sure the coast was clear, confirming when she could be with him without me knowing. I rationalised everything. The late nights were because Drew was working toward another promotion. The phone secrecy was because work emails were confidential. The lack of intimacy was just a rough patch all marriages go through. The voice in my head that said something is wrong, pay attention, was drowned out by the voice that said, you're being paranoid, you're being insecure, you're being the kind of wife who doesn't trust her husband. I wish I'd listened to that first voice. Late November rolled around, bringing grey skies and the first hints of winter cold. Our 4th anniversary was coming up in December, and I wanted to do something special. Drew had been so distant lately, and I thought maybe a romantic gesture would remind us both of why we'd fallen in love in the first place. I planned to leave school early, pick up his favourite pasta from the Italian restaurant near our house, and surprise him with an early anniversary celebration. November 20th was a Wednesday. I had an early dismissal day at school students leaving at 2 o'clock instead of the usual 3. I stopped at Giovanni's and ordered Drew's favourite dish, homemade ravioli in sage butter sauce with a side of garlic bread. The containers were still warm when I loaded them into my car, the smell making my mouth water. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months, humming along to the radio, imagining Drew's surprised face when I walked through the door. His car was in the driveway when I pulled up, which was unusual for 3:30 in the afternoon, but I figured maybe he'd come home sick or taken a half day. There was another car parked on the street that I didn't recognize, a silver BMW that looked expensive and new. I grabbed the food containers and my purse, walking up to our front door with a smile on my face. The door was unlocked. Inside, I heard music playing from upstairs, something low and rhythmic. I heard laughter, female laughter, that familiar laugh I'd heard 1,000 times over 10 years of friendship. My hands started shaking. The food containers felt suddenly heavy. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under my feet, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Our bedroom door was slightly open, just enough that I could see inside. Drew and Sienna were in our bed, my bed. The bed where I slept every night. They were tangled in the sheets I'd washed just that morning, the blue ones with white trim that I'd picked out at Target 2 years ago. Sienna's auburn hair was spread across my pillow. Drew's hand was on her waist. I stood there frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to process what I was seeing. The food containers slipped from my hands and hit the hardwood floor with a crash. Pasta sauce exploded across the hallway like blood splatter. The sound shattered the moment. They both jerked up faces, whipping toward the door, eyes going wide. Sienna's green eyes met mine. There was shock in them, surprise, but not guilt, not shame, just the startled expression of someone who'd been caught doing something they knew was wrong but didn't actually regret. How long, the words came out of my mouth, calm and flat, like I was asking about the weather. Inside I was screaming. Inside I was dying. But my voice was steady. Neither of them answered. They scrambled for clothes, Drew grabbing his boxers, Sienna reaching for her bra. The silence stretched out, filled only with the sound of fabric rustling and their heavy breathing. How long, I asked again, louder this time. Sienna spoke first. 6 months. Her voice was quiet matter of fact, like she was telling me what time it was. 6 months. Half a year. 183 days of lies and sneaking around and betrayal. I did the math instantly in my head. Since May. Since Sienna's birthday party, the one I'd thrown for her at our house, making her favourite foods and buying her expensive gifts and toasting to another year of friendship. Drew started talking words tumbling out fast and desperate. Baby, I can explain. It just happened. We didn't mean for it to happen. It doesn't mean anything. I still love you. Don't call me baby. My voice cut through his excuses like a knife. Don't you dare call me baby. How long have you been doing this in my bed? Sienna was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but they felt performative, like she was crying because that's what you're supposed to do when you get caught. Not because she actually felt remorse. I'm so sorry, querida. I never wanted to hurt you. You're my best friend. I love you. But you did it anyway. For 6 months. My laugh came out harsh and bitter. You loved me so much you slept with my husband in my house, in my bed. Drew tried to shift blame, his face red and panicked. You've been so focused on work lately. We've been distant. Things haven't been good between us. So that makes this okay. I gestured at them at the bed at the evidence of their betrayal. I've been distant, so you decided to sleep with my best friend. That's your justification. My eyes fell on the nightstand. Our wedding photo sat there in a silver frame, the 3 of us laughing, Drew and me in the centre, with Sienna beside us in her bridesmaid dress. The photo had been there the entire time they'd been doing this. They'd been betraying me while literally looking at a photo of our wedding day. Something broke inside me then. I started laughing high and hysterical, the sound bouncing off the walls. Then the laughter turned to tears, my body shaking with sobs I couldn't control. You're both dead to me, I said when I could speak again. Both of you. Dead. I turned and walked out. Behind me, Drew was calling my name. Sienna was sobbing. Neither of them followed me down the stairs. Neither of them chased after me as I grabbed my purse and keys. Neither of them tried to stop me as I got in my car and drove away, leaving tire marks on the driveway. I drove to my parents' house in suburban Boston, 40 minutes away, operating on autopilot. When my mother opened the door and saw my face, she pulled me inside without a word. I collapsed in her arms, crying so hard I could barely breathe, telling her everything between gasping sobs. My father's face turned purple with rage. "I'm going to kill them both. Where are they?" My mother held him back, held me close, let me cry until I had nothing left. That night, I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Sienna's hand on Drew's chest, Drew's mouth on Sienna's neck. The sheets tangled around their bodies, the casual intimacy that spoke of familiarity, of this not being the first time or the 10th time, but something they'd been doing regularly for months. I thought about all the signs I'd ignored, the way Drew had started wearing cologne I hadn't bought him, the way Sienna had helped me pick out lingerie for our anniversary, knowing she'd probably see Drew wearing it before I did. The Thursday nights she'd cancelled, probably because she was with him instead. The business trips that maybe weren't business trips at all. My phone started buzzing around midnight. Text after text from both of them. "Drew, please come home. We need to talk. I love you. It was a mistake. I'll never do it again. Please. Sienna, I hate myself. Please forgive me. You're my best friend. I was weak. I'm so sorry. Please call me." I blocked both numbers. The silence felt like relief. Friday morning, I called a divorce attorney. My mother's friend recommended someone named Patricia Brennan, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd been practicing family law for 25 years. I met her in her downtown office, bringing my wedding photos, our lease documents, bank statements, everything I could think of that might be relevant. "Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state," she explained, "but will document the adultery for the proceedings. It can impact things like asset division and alimony, especially given the emotional harm. I want out as fast as possible," I told her. "I don't care about the house or the furniture or any of it. I just want to be free of him." The divorce proceedings dragged from January through April, 4 months of legal paperwork and negotiations and mediation attempts. I moved out of our house and into a tiny studio apartment in Brookline, barely big enough for my bed and a small table. The walls were thin and the heat never worked properly, but it was mine, safe. A place where no one had betrayed me. Drew's lawyer tried to negotiate terms that would let Drew and me stay friends, as if friendship was even possible after what he'd done. "Your client would like to maintain an amicable relationship," his attorney said during one meeting. "He hopes that with time, Carida will understand that sometimes these things just happen." My attorney looked at me, I looked at her. "Tell your client I said clearly that I would rather be alone for the rest of my life than exchange a single word with him outside of legal proceedings." During the discovery phase, we had to exchange financial documents. That's when I learned that Drew had charged $23,000 on our joint credit card during the affair. Hotels, restaurants, gifts, all for Sienna, expensive dinners at places he'd never taken me, weekend getaways at luxury hotels while he told me he was travelling for work, jewellery that I'd never seen but that probably sat in Sienna's drawer. My attorney used this to push for Drew to cover all the debt as part of the settlement. He eventually agreed. We had one required face-to-face mediation meeting and I showed up with my attorney determined to get through it without breaking down. Drew looked terrible. He'd lost weight, had bags under his eyes, slouched in his chair, like he'd aged 10 years in 3 months. The house was in his name from before our marriage, so there wasn't much to divide. Some furniture, some wedding gifts, the car I'd bought with my teaching salary. He tried to talk to me directly during a break, approaching me in the hallway, while our attorneys reviewed paperwork. "Carida, please, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Sienna and I are still together, but we fight constantly. It's miserable. I miss you. Can we please try again? I'll cut her off completely. I'll do anything. I stared at him like he was a stranger. I would rather be alone forever than take you back. What about Sienna? My attorney asked him during the session. Are you still in a relationship? Yes, Drew admitted. We're trying to make it work. So you destroyed your marriage for her, and now you want your wife back while you're still with the other woman. Drew's face reddened. It's complicated. No, my attorney said calmly. It's really not. The divorce was finalized on April 15th, tax day. Fitting, I thought, since Drew had cost me so much. I got $15,000 in the settlement, my car, and my personal belongings. I changed my name back to my maiden name, shedding Castellano, like a snake shedding dead skin. I fell into a deep depression after the divorce finalized. The anger that had sustained me through the legal proceedings evaporated, leaving behind emptiness and exhaustion. I couldn't sleep. When I did sleep, I had nightmares. I lost weight, dropping 20 pounds in 2 months, until my clothes hung loose on my frame. At school, I struggled to maintain enthusiasm for teaching, going through the motions with my students while feeling hollow inside. My principal called me into her office in early May. Querida, you've been through tremendous trauma. Take some time off. We'll get a substitute. You need to heal. I took 2 weeks spending most of it in bed, staring at walls, crying at random moments. My mother called every day, my father visited every week, bringing groceries I didn't eat, and trying to make me laugh with terrible jokes that didn't land. I started therapy with Dr. Helen Kowalski, who specialized in betrayal trauma. She had kind eyes and a calm voice and an office with comfortable chairs and plants that somehow made it easier to talk about the worst moments of my life. In our sessions, I talked about trust and identity, and how I'd tied so much of my self-worth to being a good wife and a good friend. Without those roles, who was I, your querida? Dr. Kowalski said gently. You're a teacher who impacts children's lives every day. You're a daughter your parents adore. You're a woman who deserves loyalty and honesty. Their betrayal doesn't define you, it defines them. The anger came back in waves. I punched pillows in my apartment. I screamed in my car on empty roads. I broke dishes safely in my sink, watching them shatter and feeling a tiny bit of release with each crash. I cycled through all the stages of grief. Denial had been those first moments seeing them together. Anger sustained me through the divorce. Bargaining came late at night when I wondered what if I'd been more attentive, more exciting, more something. The turn came during Teacher Appreciation Week in late May. One of my students, a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, gave me a drawing she'd made. It showed me standing in front of a classroom with a huge smile and a crown on my head. The words said, "The best teacher ever," in crayon letters. I stared at that drawing and realized something crucial. My worth wasn't tied to Drew staying faithful or Sienna being loyal. My worth existed independent of their actions. These kids loved me. My parents loved me. I had value that had nothing to do with being someone's wife or someone's friend. I put the drawing on my refrigerator and made a decision. I was going to survive this, more than survive. I was going to build a life I loved. Early June brought an unexpected turn. I'd started taking morning walks, trying to rebuild my physical and mental health one step at a time. I'd developed a routine of walking through Cambridge, stopping at a small coffee shop near Harvard Square for a latte before heading home. On a Wednesday morning, I was leaving the coffee shop, checking my phone and not paying attention. I walked straight into someone, my coffee exploding all over both of us. Hot liquid soaked through my shirt and splashed onto the other person's expensive-looking suit. "I am so sorry," I looked up, mortified, and froze. The man I'd collided with was startlingly familiar. Dark hair, strong jawline, similar height and build to Drew, but older, more refined, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The man looked at me, and recognition dawned in his eyes at the same moment it hit me. "You're Drew's brother." "Julian," he corrected, pulling napkins from his pocket to dab at his suit. "And you're Querida." We stood there on the sidewalk, both covered in coffee, staring at each other in mutual shock. I hadn't seen Julian in years, hadn't even thought about him since the wedding, where he'd been a groomsman, but had left early citing work obligations. "I am so sorry," I repeated, gesturing helplessly at his ruined suit. "Please let me buy you another coffee, and maybe pay for dry cleaning." His mouth quirked in a small smile. "Let me buy you another coffee." This was my fault for not watching where I was going. We went back into this coffee shop, ordered replacements, and somehow ended up sitting at a small table by the window. The conversation that followed changed everything. I heard what happened, Julian said once we were settled. "I'm sorry. My brother is an idiot." The bluntness surprised a laugh out of me. That's putting it mildly. He's always been selfish. Even when we were kids. Julian's expression was hard to read. "We haven't spoken in 3 years. I didn't know that. Drew never mentioned it. That doesn't surprise me." Julian took a sip of his coffee. "We had a falling out after our mother's funeral." "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I didn't know your mother passed away." 3 years ago. Cancer." Julian's voice was flat, controlled. "During her final weeks, Drew had an affair with my girlfriend at the time. My serious girlfriend. The woman I was planning to propose to. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Drew did this before. To you?" Julian nodded. "I warned her. I told her Drew had a pattern of going after what wasn't his. She didn't believe me, chose him instead. Their relationship lasted about 2 months before she realized he wasn't actually interested in her, just in taking her away from me. I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say. Drew is who he is." Julian looked at me directly, his eyes intense. "But you didn't deserve what he did to you. No one does." We talked for 2 hours. Julian lived in New York City, working as an investment banker, a partner at a prestigious firm. He was 35, 6 years older than Drew, and carried himself with a confidence and maturity his younger brother had never possessed. He was in Boston for business meetings, staying for the week. Before we parted, he handed me his business card. "If you ever need to talk to someone who understands what Drew is capable of, call me." I took the card, not really believing I'd use it. But something about Julian's directness, his lack of pity, his understanding stuck with me. Through mutual acquaintances, I started hearing about Drew and Sienna's relationship. They were fighting constantly. Neighbours heard screaming matches through the walls of Drew's house. Sienna had lost her job at the luxury department store after her reputation became tarnished by the affair scandal. Drew still worked long hours, was emotionally unavailable, treated Sienna with the same casual disregard he'd eventually shown me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They'd destroyed my marriage and her friendship for a relationship that was toxic and miserable. Sienna was reportedly telling people she'd made a terrible mistake. Drew was still the same man he'd always been, just with a different woman to disappoint. I felt a mixture of vindication and emptiness hearing this news. Part of me was glad they were suffering consequences. Part of me just felt sad that it had all been for nothing. They'd burned everything down and had nothing to show for it but ashes. Summer arrived. I said yes when teaching friends invited me to things. I went to book clubs and wine tastings and weekend trips to the beach. I started rebuilding my social circle, finding people who hadn't been tainted by Drew and Sienna's presence. I laughed more, slept better, gained back some of the weight I'd lost. And sometimes, when I was feeling lonely or uncertain, I'd pull out Julian's business card and stare at it, wondering if it would be weird to reach out. In July, I sent him a text. "Hey, this is Querida. I was wondering if you're ever back in Boston." His response came within minutes. "Actually, I'm here next week for meetings." Coffee, we met at the same coffee shop where we'd first collided. This time, no coffee was spilled. We talked easily, covering everything from books we'd read to places we'd travelled to, philosophies about life and work. Julian was thoughtful in a way Drew had never been asking questions and actually listening to the answers, building on what I said rather than waiting for his turn to talk. He came to Boston frequently over the next few months, and we fell into a pattern. Coffee when he was in town, Texts when he wasn't, conversations that started about surface things and gradually deepened into real connection. He never mentioned Drew unless I brought him up, never treated me like I was damaged or broken, just talked to me like I was a complete person worth knowing. What I learned about Julian over those months painted a picture of someone fundamentally different from his brother. Julian had worked his way up in finance through merit and dedication. He'd been in a few serious relationships, but they'd ended amicably when paths diverged. He was close with his friends, loyal to people who deserved it, and had cut toxic people out of his life without hesitation. "I told you about Drew's affair with my girlfriend Julian," said during a walk along the Charles River in August. "What I didn't tell you is that I warned her about him multiple times, and when she chose him anyway and it predictably fell apart, I still didn't take her back. Some people think that makes me cold, but I learned that you teach people how to treat you, and I refuse to accept betrayal." That resonated deeply. I'd spent so much time wondering if I should have fought harder for Drew, if I should have tried to work things out. But Julian's perspective gave me permission to know that walking away from someone who betrayed you wasn't giving up. It was self-respect. By September, something had shifted between us. The texts came more frequently. The coffee dates lasted longer. There was an undercurrent I couldn't quite name, a pull toward each other that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Julian called me on a Tuesday evening. "I'm going to be in Boston this weekend. I'd like to take you to dinner, as more than friends if you're open to it." My immediate response was panic. "I'm not ready, it's too soon. This is too complicated." "No pressure," he said calmly. "The offer stands whenever you're ready. If that's never, I understand." I spent 2 weeks thinking about it, talking about it in therapy, weighing fear against possibility. Dr. Kowalski asked me what I was really afraid of, that he'll turn out like Drew, that I'll trust someone and they'll destroy me again. "Is Julian giving you any indication that he's like Drew?" "No, the opposite, actually." "Then maybe the question isn't whether you can trust him. Maybe it's whether you can trust yourself to leave if red flags appear." That reframed everything. I called Julian. "Yes, I'd like to have dinner with you." We went to New York for a weekend in early October. Separate hotel rooms because Julian respected boundaries without me even having to ask. Dinner at a small French bistro in the West Village where we talked for hours. A walk through Washington Square Park where leaves crunched under our feet and street musicians played jazz. And then Julian stopped walking, turned to me, and kissed me. It was soft and patient and nothing like kissing Drew had been. Drew had always been urgent, demanding. Julian was asking a question, waiting for my answer. I kissed him back, and for the first time since November, I felt alive. The weekend unfolded in moments of discovery. Saturday, we went to museums and held hands in Central Park and talked about everything and nothing. Saturday night, I went to Julian's apartment, a beautiful space overlooking the park with floor-to-ceiling windows and shelves full of books. We took things slowly. Julian never pushed, never assumed, checked in constantly to make sure I was comfortable. The intimacy we shared that night was about connection and presence. Julian focused entirely on me in a way that felt revolutionary after years with someone who'd always been half absent, even when physically present. Sunday morning, we had brunch at a cafe near his apartment. Julian asked me where I saw this going. "I'm terrified," I admitted, "but I want to try. I'll never hurt you the way he did." Julian took my hand across the table. "I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll be honest, always." We spent the next months navigating a long-distance relationship. Boston to New York was 220 miles, just over 3 hours by train. We alternated weekends, me going to him or him coming to me. The phone calls and texts were constant. Unlike Drew, who'd gradually withdrawn, Julian stayed present and engaged even when we weren't in the same city. Thanksgiving arrived. Julian invited me to spend it with him in New York. I accepted my first holiday, not with my parents since the divorce. We cooked together in his kitchen, making a small turkey, and all the traditional sides eating at his dining table, while snow started to fall outside. I met Julian's friends that weekend, a tight circle of colleagues and college buddies, who welcomed me warmly. One of his friends, Nadia, pulled me aside at a dinner party. "He talks about you constantly. I've never seen him like this with anyone." December brought an official relationship conversation. Julian asked me to be his girlfriend, which felt both adolescent and perfect. We made it. Official changed our social media relationship statuses, told our respective friend groups. My parents were cautious when I told them my father, especially protective after what Drew had done. "I want to meet him," my father said firmly. Julian came to Boston for Christmas. I took him to my parents' house, nervous about their reception. My father grilled him for the first hour, asking pointed questions about his intentions and his values, and how we knew he was different from his brother. "You don't know," Julian said honestly. "You have no reason to trust me based on my last name, but I'll prove it through actions, not words. I won't ask you to believe me. I'll show you." That answer, combined with Julian's obvious respect and his genuine care for me, slowly won my parents over. By the end of the evening, my father was laughing at Julian's jokes, and my mother was already planning future dinners together. New Year's Eve. We went to Times Square, despite it being the most tourist thing imaginable. At midnight, surrounded by thousands of people and falling confetti, Julian kissed me and said, "I love you," for the first time. I said it back without hesitation. "I love you too." The words felt different than when I'd said them to Drew. With Drew, I'd been in love with potential, with the idea of who we could be. With Julian, I loved who he actually was: present, honest, kind, whole. In January, we had a serious conversation about our relationship. We were sitting in his apartment, snow falling outside, when Julian brought up the obvious obstacle. "Will you always compare me to Drew? Will you always be waiting for me to turn into him?" "Sometimes I'm scared you will," I admitted. "Not because of anything you've done, just because the trauma makes me question everything. I understand that fear." He took my hand. "And I won't get defensive about it. You have every right to be cautious. But I need you to know something. I learned from watching Drew destroy everything he touched. I learned what not to be. I'll never be perfect, but I'll never be him." I told him about Drew's attempts to contact him after the Sienna situation imploded. Julian had refused to engage, maintaining the boundary he'd set 3 years earlier. Drew had tried to reconnect, probably hoping his brother would help him or offer support, but Julian had been firm. "Leave me alone, and leave Querida alone." "Does it bother you," I asked, "that I was married to your brother? It bothers me that he treated you like you were disposable when you were the best thing that ever happened to him." Julian's expression was fierce. "But no, it doesn't bother me that you have a past. Everyone has a past. What matters is what we build together." February brought a major development. Julian started exploring positions in Boston. "I want to be near you," he told me, over dinner at my tiny studio apartment. "I'm tired of only seeing you every other weekend. I want to build a life with you, not around you." He interviewed with several firms and accepted a partnership position at a prestigious Boston investment company. The salary was significant, triple what Drew had made in his best year. But Julian wore success lightly, never flashy or ostentatious, generous without being showy. April arrived and Julian moved back to his hometown. He bought a penthouse apartment in the Seaport district with stunning views of Boston Harbor. The space was beautiful but not cold, filled with comfortable furniture and art and those shelves of books he'd collected over years. I kept at my studio apartment, initially not ready to fully merge our lives, but I stayed at Julian's place most weekends. We fell into routines. Grocery shopping together, cooking dinner while talking about our days, falling asleep tangled together in his comfortable bed. Julian integrated into my life seamlessly. He met my teaching friends and charmed them all with his genuine interest in education policy and his respect for the work we did. He came to school career day and talked to my second graders about finance in ways they could understand, using candy and toys to explain concepts like investment and saving. My students loved him. Miss Querida's boyfriend is so nice, they'd tell me. Is he going to be your husband? Maybe someday, I'd say, smiling. My parents fully embraced Julian. My father, who'd wanted to kill Drew after the betrayal, told me one evening that Julian was the kind of man he'd always hoped I'd find. Your mother and I can see how he looks at you, like you're precious. That's how a man should look at the woman he loves. Julian met my circle of teacher friends, joining us for happy hours and weekend brunches, existing comfortably in my world, despite coming from the high-powered finance sector. He never made anyone feel less than for earning teacher salaries instead of investment banker bonuses. He asked questions and listened and treated everyone with respect. In May, over a year into our relationship, the inevitable happened. Boston isn't that big and social circles overlap. Drew saw us at a restaurant in the North End. We were having dinner at a small Italian place, sharing a bottle of wine and a plate of pasta, laughing about something silly when I saw Drew across the room. He was alone, looking thin and tired. Our eyes met and I watched his face go through a series of reactions: confusion, recognition, shock. Then he saw who I was with, his brother, sitting close, holding hands clearly together. Drew's face went white, then red. He got up and walked toward our table. My stomach clenched. Julian's hand tightened on mine. Drew's voice was loud enough that other diners looked over. "What are you doing with my wife?" "Your ex-wife," Julian corrected calmly. "And we're together." Drew's shock was visible even from 5 feet away. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You're dating my brother. That's low, Querida." "No," I said, my voice steady. "What's low is sleeping with my best friend in my bed for 6 months. The nearby tables went completely silent. People were staring now. Drew's face flushed darker. "You can't just move on with my family," Drew sputtered. "That's wrong. That's revenge." "Actually," Julian said, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel, "we're having a private dinner. Please leave." The restaurant manager appeared, sensing trouble. "Is everything all right here?" "We're fine," I said. "This gentleman was just leaving." Drew stood there for another long moment, breathing hard, glaring at both of us. Then he turned and stalked out of the restaurant, several diners watching him go. "Are you okay?" Julian asked softly once Drew was gone. "I'm perfect," I said, and realized it was true. Seeing Drew didn't hurt anymore. It didn't make me angry or sad. I just felt nothing for him, which was the best possible outcome. Word spread through our social circles within days. Drew and Querida's ex-husband, our brothers, became the hottest piece of gossip. People took sides, debated whether it was appropriate, speculated about how it happened. Sienna found out through mutual connections. She got to a new phone number and texted me. "We need to talk." I deleted the message without responding. There was nothing she could say that I needed to hear. Drew tried calling Julian repeatedly, leaving angry voicemails. "How could you do this to me?" "She was my wife. You're supposed to be my brother." Julian sent one text in response. "I don't owe you anything. You destroyed your marriage yourself. Now stay away from both of us." The reversal of their positions wasn't lost on anyone. Drew and Sienna, who'd been so certain of their love, who'd justified their affair by claiming they couldn't help their feelings, were now upset that I'd moved on. They'd expected me to stay broken to pine for what I'd lost. Instead, I'd built something better. June arrived exactly 1 year since Julian and I had literally bumped into each other outside that coffee shop. He asked me to meet him there on a Saturday morning, said he wanted to recreate our first meeting. I showed up at 10 o'clock, ordering a coffee and waiting outside. Julian appeared from around the corner, walking fast, and deliberately bumped into me. Coffee spilled on both of us just like that first day. Then he got down on one knee right there on the sidewalk. "I'm going to keep bumping into you for the rest of my life," he said, pulling out a ring box. "I know you've been hurt. I know trust is hard. But I promise you every day for the rest of our lives, I will choose you." I will honor you. I will love you the way you deserve to be loved. Marry me. The ring was vintage Art Deco platinum, with an emerald-cut diamond that caught the morning light. It was elegant and sophisticated and perfect. Tears streamed down my face. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The small crowd that had gathered outside the coffee shop erupted in applause. People were filming on their phones, cheering, congratulating us. The coffee shop manager came out and announced that we'd get free coffee for life. We called our parents immediately. My mother cried happy tears. My father told Julian he'd better take care of me or else. Julian's aunt, who'd raised him after his mother died, welcomed me to the family with genuine warmth. Friends posted congratulations on social media. Word spread through Boston's social circles. Corrida got engaged to Julian Castellano, Drew's brother. The gossip was delicious for everyone except Drew and Sienna. We set the wedding date for the following April, giving us 10 months to plan. We chose an elegant estate in Lexington, Massachusetts, with beautiful gardens and a classic ballroom. Guest list was capped at 150 people. My side included family, teaching colleagues and college friends who'd remained loyal through the divorce. Julian's side included his finance colleagues, business partners, and childhood friends. Drew was obviously not invited. Neither was Sienna or anyone else from that toxic chapter of my life. We spent the summer and fall planning, dress shopping with my mother and Julian's aunt, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, selecting music. Unlike my first wedding, which had felt like performing for others, this wedding felt deeply personal. Julian was surprisingly involved, having strong opinions about flower arrangements and insisting we serve really good wine. We discussed a prenup openly. Julian suggested it not because he didn't trust me, but because he believed in protecting both of us. I agreed easily. We sat with lawyers and worked out terms that felt fair and transparent. No secrets, no hidden agendas, just two adults building a life together with open eyes. In December, invitations went out. We'd addressed them carefully, double-checking the guest list to make sure no one connected to Drew or Sienna received one. Then, in January, an unexpected RSVP arrived. Julian's aunt, who'd raised him after his mother's death, responded that she was bringing a +1. The name on her response card made my blood run cold. Drew Castellano. Julian called his aunt immediately, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Aunt Margaret, you cannot bring Drew to my wedding. He's my nephew too," she said, her voice sad but firm. "I raised you both after your mother died. I can't exclude him from major family events. It wouldn't be right. He betrayed Corrida in the worst possible way. He had an affair with her best friend. I know, dear. And what he did was wrong, but he's still family." Julian argued for 20 minutes. I listened on speakerphone, my heart sinking with each exchange, but Aunt Margaret was firm. She loved both her nephews. She felt obligated to include both. If she couldn't bring Drew, she wouldn't come at all. Julian hung up his face, stormy. "I'm so sorry. I'll uninvite her if you want." I thought about it carefully. She raised you. She's important to you. I understand her position even if I hate it. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "We'll have security. If Drew causes any problems, they'll remove him. It's our day. He can't ruin it unless we let him." But the knowledge that Drew would be at my wedding watching me marry his brother cast a shadow over the final months of planning. April 26th arrived with perfect spring weather. The sky was clear and blue, temperatures climbing to a comfortable 70 degrees. The estate's gardens were in full bloom, tulips and daffodils, creating waves of colour across the manicured lawns. I got ready in the bridal suite with my mother and my bridesmaids, 5 women from my teaching job who'd become true friends over the years. A professional team did my hair and makeup, creating an elegant updo that felt sophisticated and timeless. When I put on my dress, a simple ivory silk gown with no train and clean lines, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. "You look so happy, sweetheart," my mother said, tears in her eyes. So genuinely happy. I am, I told her. I really, really am. There were no nerves this time, no cold feet or second thoughts, just excitement and certainty and joy. This was right. Julian was right. We were right. In the groom's suite, Julian was getting ready with his groomsmen college friends and colleagues, who'd become close over the years. He told them later that he'd felt completely calm, more sure of this decision than anything else in his life. The one point of tension was Drew's presence. Security had been briefed to watch him carefully. Julian's groomsmen were ready to intervene if needed. We'd done everything we could to prepare for potential disruption. Julian and I did a first look in the garden before the ceremony. When he saw me, tears filled his eyes. "You're breathtaking," he whispered, taking my hands. I gave him a vintage locket with our photo inside. He gave me cufflinks with the coordinates of the coffee shop where we'd met engraved on them. We stood together in the garden, just the two of us, for a few precious minutes before the ceremony began. 4 o'clock, string quartet playing classical music. White chairs arranged in rows facing a flower arch bursting with peonies and roses. Guests seated dressed in spring colours, smiling and chatting quietly. Drew arrived with Aunt Margaret slipping into a seat in the back row. Security noted his presence. One of Julian's groomsmen kept him in peripheral vision, but Drew sat quietly, face neutral, giving no indication of planning anything disruptive. Sienna was definitely not there. We'd confirmed with everyone we knew that she hadn't been invited and wouldn't be welcome. The day was clear of her presence. The processional began. Bridesmaids in blush-coloured dresses walked down the petal-strewn aisle. Then the music shifted to the bridal march. My father took my arm and we walked together toward Julian, who was standing at the altar with tears streaming down his face. The ceremony was officiated by Julian's college mentor, a kind man who'd known him for 15 years. He spoke about partnership and choosing each other daily and building a life based on honesty and respect. Then it was time for vows. Julian went first, his voice steady but emotional. "Querida, you taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every single day, even on the hard days. You showed me what it means to be truly seen and valued. I promise to honour you, to respect you, to be present with you, and to love you with my whole heart for the rest of my life." My turn. My voice shook but held. "Julian, you showed me that my past doesn't define my future. You taught me that trust can be rebuilt and that love can be healthy and whole. You see me clearly and love me anyway. I promise to choose you, to stand beside you, to build a life with you, and to love you more with each passing year." Ring exchange. Simple platinum bands that matched. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. Julian kissed me while guests cheered and the quartet played something joyful and triumphant. We walked back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Julian Castellano. I'd chosen to take his name, reclaiming Castellano, and filling it with new meaning. It wasn't Drew's name anymore. It was mine and Julian's. Cocktail hour in the garden while photos were taken. The photographer captured us, laughing, kissing, holding hands, lost in our own happiness. Then into the ballroom for the reception. The space was transformed with candlelight and flowers, elegant and romantic, without being over the top. The DJ announced us. Mr. and Mrs. Julian Castellano. We entered to applause, walking to the dance floor for our first dance. At Last, by Etta James, played, while Julian held me close and we swayed together. He leaned down and whispered in my ear, "My love, you're everything I ever wanted," that phrase, my love. He'd started calling me that months ago, and it never failed to make my heart warm. It was casual, but meaningful, a constant reminder that I was cherished. Dinner was served. Julian and I sat at a sweetheart table, watching our loved ones eat and drink and celebrate with us. Toasts began. Julian's best man, his college roommate, told stories about Julian's transformation over the past 2 years how meeting me had opened him up in ways his friends had never seen. My maid of honor, a fellow teacher named Amy, spoke about resilience and new beginnings, about watching me heal and grow and find happiness again. She didn't mention Drew or Sienna by name, but the subtext was clear. My father did the father-daughter dance, and I cried through the whole thing as he told me how proud he was and how happy Julian made me. Julian danced with Aunt Margaret, who was tearful and loving, clearly struggling with having both her nephews in the same room, but trying to focus on celebration. The evening was magical, dancing and laughter and joy. I forgot about Drew's presence, completely lost in the happiness of the moment. Then, around 9 o'clock, there was a commotion at the bar. Drew was there, clearly drunk, his voice getting loud as he complained to the bartender. My brother stole my wife. He couldn't find his own woman, so he took mine. Other guests were starting to notice, becoming uncomfortable. Julian's friend immediately alerted him. Julian excused himself from the conversation he was having and walked calmly toward the bar. I followed, my heart racing, but my head clear. This was our day. Drew couldn't ruin it. Julian reached the bar and addressed his brother. "There he is," Drew slurred, turning to face him. The better son, the golden child, always taking what's mine. "She was never yours," Julian said calmly. "You threw her away. I fell in love with who she actually is. You couldn't find your own woman." Drew's voice was getting louder. "Had to take mine. She wasn't your property to take or keep." Julian's voice stayed level. "And this is my wedding day. You need to leave." That's when the ballroom doors opened and Sienna walked in. She shouldn't have been able to get past security. Later, we found out she'd slipped in through a service entrance determination, overriding common sense. But there she was, standing in the doorway of our reception, looking absolutely terrible. She'd lost weight, too much weight, her dress hanging loose on her frame. Her hair was badly dyed the auburn I remembered now, a brassy orange-red. Her makeup was smudged like she'd been crying. She looked like a shadow of the confident, beautiful woman who'd once been my best friend. The music stopped. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward her. Security started moving, but Julian held up a hand, stopping them. He wanted to see what she'd do. Sienna's eyes scanned the room until they found me. Then Julian standing beside me with his arm around my waist. Her face went completely white. All the colour drained out of her skin. Her mouth dropped open. She walked toward us like a sleepwalker, moving on instinct rather than thought. Guests parted to let her through, everyone watching this drama unfold. We stood face to face for the first time in 3 years. She stared at me in my wedding dress, then at Julian in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, then at our hands clasped together, wedding bands gleaming. "You married Julian?" Her voice was hoarse, disbelieving. "I did," I said calmly, her eyes fixed on Julian. Julian Castellano, the investment banker. She'd heard about him from Drew clearly, knew he was successful and wealthy. Her face showed the mental calculation happening. She was realizing what I'd gained and what she'd lost. Julian pulled me closer, his arm tightening around my waist. "This is my wife, and you need to leave." He said my love then, using the endearment naturally the way he always did. Sienna flinched like the words had physically struck her. Tears started streaming down her face. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" Her voice broke on the words. "Yes," I said simply. "You did. Now please go." Drew had stumbled over from the bar, drawn by the commotion. When he saw Sienna, his face contorted. "Sienna, what are you doing here?" They stood there, the two people who'd betrayed me, facing each other in the middle of my wedding reception. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. "You said you loved me," Sienna said to Drew, her voice accusing. That was before Drew shot back. "We're done. We've been done for a year." "You destroyed my life for nothing," Sienna said, starting to sob. "I destroyed your life," Drew's voice rose. "You ruined everything. Security had had enough." Two large men in suits converged on Drew and Sienna, taking each by the arm. "Let's go," one of them said firmly but professionally. Drew and Sienna were escorted out, still arguing with each other, their voices fading as they were removed from the building. Every guest in the ballroom had witnessed the entire scene. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the DJ, bless him, restarted the music. Something upbeat and celebratory. Julian turned to me, concern in his eyes. "Are you okay?" "I've never been better," I said and meant it. He kissed me right there in front of everyone, and the guests erupted in applause. We'd handled the disruption with grace. We hadn't let them ruin our day. And everyone there had witnessed exactly what Drew and Sienna had become versus what Julian and I had built. The rest of the evening was perfect. Dancing and celebration and joy, cutting the cake, bouquet toss, garter toss, all the traditional elements happening exactly as they should. By the time the reception ended at midnight, Drew and Sienna's appearance felt like a bad dream quickly fading. Julian and I left in a car decorated with just married signs, waving goodbye to our guests, heading to a hotel for the night, before flying out for our honeymoon in the morning. In the hotel room, we collapsed on the bed, exhausted but happy. "That was insane," I said. Julian laughed. Seeing their faces when they realised we were married was almost worth the drama. Almost. He pulled me close. "Nothing can top actually marrying you. That's the real victory." We fell asleep tangled together, husband and wife, ready to start our new life. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy. Amalfi Coast, Rome, Venice. We unplugged completely, turning off our phones, ignoring social media, existing only in the present moment with each other. We ate incredible food and drank amazing wine and walked through ancient cities hand in hand. When we returned to Boston, we moved fully into Julian's penthouse together. I gave up my studio apartment, combining our lives completely. We settled into married life easily. I continued teaching, Julian continued managing his firm. We had routines and inside jokes and lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper together. News filtered back to us through mutual connections. Drew and Sienna had officially ended their relationship after the wedding disaster. It had been dying for over a year, apparently both of them staying together out of stubbornness rather than love. The wedding had been the final straw. Drew went back to serial dating, never settling down, getting a reputation as someone who couldn't commit. Sienna moved to Philadelphia, starting over in a new city where no one knew about her past. Both of them were alone, dealing with the consequences of their choices. I felt indifferent toward both of them, not angry anymore, not hurt, just nothing. They were strangers who'd once been important to me, now faded into irrelevance. 3 months after our wedding, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but Julian encouraged me to take it. It was Sienna. Her voice sounded different, smaller, humbler. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said immediately. "I just need you to know I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry." I listened without speaking. "I've been in therapy for 8 months, working through why I did what I did, and I've realised that my insecurity and jealousy drove everything. You had this perfect life, and I wanted it. I wanted to feel special. Drew pursued me and made me feel desired, and I was weak enough to destroy our friendship for that feeling." She paused. "I'm not making excuses. What I did was unforgivable. I owned it completely. But I need you to know that you were the best friend I ever had, and I destroyed that because of my own brokenness. I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "But I can't have you in my life. Too much damage was done." "I understand." Sienna's voice was thick with tears. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you're happy. From what I saw at your wedding, you are, and I'm glad for that, even though I have no right to be." The call ended. I sat with it for a long time, processing. It was closure I hadn't known I needed. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement, understanding that her actions came from her pain, even though that didn't excuse them. I told Julian about the call that evening. "How do you feel about it?" he asked. "Lighter," I admitted. like I can fully close that chapter now. Over the following months, I reflected on my journey. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately freed me. If Drew hadn't cheated, if Sienna hadn't betrayed me, I never would have met Julian. I never would have learned what healthy love looked like. The difference between my marriages was stark. Drew had taken from me. He'd diminished me, made me smaller, questioned my worth. Julian elevated me. He saw my value and reflected it back. He made me feel stronger and more capable and more whole. At school, I became a mentor for other teachers going through divorce. I used my experience to help colleagues navigate their own betrayals, offering support and understanding. I started a book club at school, focusing on resilience and growth. My students benefited from having a teacher who understood pain and healing, who could offer empathy to kids from broken homes. The transformation from broken to whole, from victim to victor, happened gradually, through therapy and friendship and self-work and time. And through Julian's steady presence, not as a saviour but as a partner who saw my worth when I'd forgotten it myself. 3 years into our marriage, we started discussing children. We'd both always wanted to be parents, and we felt ready to expand our family. The future stretched ahead of us, full of possibility and promise. One evening, sitting on our balcony watching the sun set over Boston Harbor, Julian asked me if I ever thought about Drew and Sienna anymore. Honestly, no, I leaned against him. They're footnotes in my story now. Important in that they taught me what I wouldn't accept, but not important beyond that. Do you think what happened was fate? Like it was meant to be, so we could find each other? I don't know about fate. I thought about it. But I know that sometimes the worst things that happen to us clear the path for the best things. Their betrayal made space for you, and that turned out to be the greatest gift, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. Looking back now, I can see the trajectory clearly. The woman who walked in on her husband and best friend in bed was destroyed. But that destruction was necessary. I had to break completely to rebuild myself into someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who wouldn't settle for crumbs of affection or accept betrayal as inevitable. The best revenge, really, is living well. When Sienna saw me at that wedding, she didn't just see me married to a man more successful and kinder than Drew. She saw me genuinely happy, glowing, loved. She saw everything she'd thrown away for a man who wasn't worth the sacrifice, and the sweetest victory isn't making them suffer. It's being so completely happy that their suffering doesn't matter anymore. It's building something so beautiful that their destruction of your past becomes irrelevant. Julian calls me my love constantly. In the morning when I wake up, when he comes home from work, before we fall asleep at night. It's his favourite name for me, and it reminds me daily that I am loved, cherished, valued. That's what I want people to know. That betrayal isn't the end of your story. It's painful and devastating and feels like it might kill you, but it won't. You'll survive it. And if you do the work, if you heal properly, if you learn the lessons, you'll come out stronger. Your value isn't determined by people who couldn't see it. When someone throws you away, it says everything about them and nothing about you. The right person will see your worth and honor it. The right person will choose you daily, not just in the beginning, but through all the years that follow. So, have you ever had a friendship betrayal that led you to something better? Are you still healing from someone's betrayal? Drop your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, if you've been through something similar or know someone who has hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs to hear that betrayal isn't the end of their story. Thank you for listening to my journey from devastation to joy. Thank you for witnessing my transformation. And remember, your past doesn't define your future. The people who betrayed you don't get to write the rest of your story. You do. Wishing you all the strength to walk away from what hurts you, the courage to embrace what heals you, and the wisdom to know that you deserve genuine love and loyalty. May you find your own version of happiness, whether that's with a partner or in your own beautiful solitude. May you learn that your worth is inherent, not dependent on anyone else's ability to see it. And may you never settle for less than you deserve again.